Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my Week 10 Top 25 predictions. Pretty bad week of football overall, with a super high, but a lot of whatever matchups. Um, yeah. Without saying too much, let's get straight into this thing. A like and subscribe would help. A comment always helps. Let's go. So I believe this is on Friday night. Boise State, they just won the game, the only game left on their schedule that poses a threat this point forward. Um, they beat UNLV on the road. It was close. It was competitive, but Boise State won, and it was a road game. So they're probably the group of 5 team in. I could see this one being a bit more defensive because San Diego State, you know, they're always a more defensive team, but quite frankly, San Diego State isn't that good right now. So Boise State's probably got this one fairly easily. Ohio State at Penn State. Here it is, the big matchup. And last time Oregon and Ohio State played, they favored Ohio State to go on the road and win by 3.5. They're favoring them again to go on the road and win by 3.5. I think Oregon might be a better football team than Penn State, and after all, it was a really close game. However, Penn State gets the glorious advantage of a super good home field advantage. There can be a lot of momentum for Penn State going into this game, and to be honest, Penn State's been pretty solid this year. Kind of flying, even though they're number 3 and undefeated, they're kind of flying under the radar right now. People are, nobody's ever really talking about Penn State that much. Like I see everybody's predictions and stuff in their brackets for the college football playoff, and a lot of people have Penn State like, you know, not really like some people don't even have them in there. Some people don't have them winning the Big Ten championship, and it's kind of disrespectful because although Penn State hasn't really gotten much of an opportunity until this weekend to play anybody. They did beat the crap out of Illinois in a defensive shutdown, but so did Oregon, so it's kind of eh. But, a big road win against USC. I don't care what USC's record is. They've played so many teams very tough this year, and after all, they're one of the only teams to beat LSU. I think USC is much better than their record. They've just lost some really unfortunate games, kind of like Kansas, but that was a big road win there. And Ohio State, that Oregon game was super competitive, but after that, you think you'd bounce back with a huge win against Nebraska, and you don't. I think they even had a bye week in between that as well before going into the Nebraska game. If I'm not wrong, I believe that may be the case, but I don't know. You look, yeah, they did. They had a bye week after the Oregon game, going into the Nebraska game, and you host them, and you barely escape Nebraska, the same team that just got absolutely thrashed by Indiana. So Ohio State, to me, I'm not really too sure about them as a whole team if they're super capable. Because if anything, Nebraska has a pretty good defense, but I'm assuming Ryan Day is a really good coach, okay? People saying that he's in the hot seat right now are really fucking stupid people cuz dude, this guy has had this team at one of the top levels of college football. I mean, that's all you can ask for as an Ohio State fan. You're always a top dog. And now guess what? Now it's your time that you finally get away from Michigan. There's still plenty of room to bounce back, and I think that's what Ryan Day is really looking to do. You took a 1-point loss on the road against Oregon. Ryan Day is going to rally his team. They have a lot to learn from that Oregon game, and they want to deliver a loss to Penn State on the road. I do think there's capability to do it here, but Penn State also has really struggled throughout the years to beat Ohio State. So Penn State could be one of those top dogs in the conference. It's always been Penn State's been whatever up until their matchup against either Penn State or I'm sorry, against Ohio State or these most recent years, Michigan. And Penn State couldn't beat them. They just couldn't beat them. This is Penn State's opportunity and their only opportunity the rest of the year. This is their last opportunity the rest of the year. If they beat Ohio State, They got a pretty free schedule with maybe a tough game at Minnesota. I'm not too sure about that though. It might be tough for Penn State, but you win this one, it's pretty green grass. Like you've got a clear field ahead of you. Ohio State, on the other hand, you win this one, you still got Indiana up ahead, who Indiana right now I think looks like a better team than Penn State. And a part of me wants to take Ohio State, but a part of me also wants to take Penn State, which kind of was the same situation with the Oregon game. It's kind of just a pick and choose. It's just a pick and choose game. I think, though, that Penn State, their quarterback, Drew Aller, they've got weapons on the offense, weapons that have been, I guess, relatively silent, but also not really silent and actually super clutch. Drew Aller he's having a great year. Like, he's having a really good year. Shit, dude, he's 6'5", 238 pounds. He's a big boy. But also, they've got running backs, man. Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, both two really solid running backs, which pretty much is going to be relentless firepower on the Ohio State defense. You know, when you get two running backs that are both super, super solid, like think about Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, you basically just get two super solid running backs, which is just more breadth. It's more, I guess it's more stamina than the defense. The defense will struggle to completely shut down Penn State's offense. Although Penn State's offense has, I mean, I guess you could say they've quote-unquote struggled. In that Illinois game, they had almost 400 yards of offense and only 21 points. It looks like if the only thing that held them back was a failed fourth down conversion and probably penalties that just happened at bad times. Because with 400 yards of offense, you can pretty much shut a team down. A missed field goal, downs, another missed field goal. So Penn State was also kind of on the verge of putting up a game like Oregon did. It's just mistakes, like tiny mistakes that weren't necessarily too important. But other than that, I mean, Penn State got down big going into halftime against USC. They brought it all the way back. Solely their offense, too. Their defense wasn't really keeping up that well with USC. Like, the defense allowed USC to score 20 like that. They allowed them to score 10 in the second half, which is pretty good. But they relied on a missed field goal to pretty much win the game. Although I think Penn State's offense would have scored a touchdown in that overtime because in the second half, you know, they were just ripping off points. Their team was looking great. Drew Aller is a pretty good quarterback. He disappointed me last year, but he is starting to look a lot better this year. And now, yes, while Ohio State is levels ahead of a team they've played this year, I've got faith. Again, I've restored my faith in Penn State, and I do think Ohio State's offense has weapons and stuff. It's just I've never really been sure about Will Howard going to Ohio State. I honestly think he just should have stayed at Kansas State. Like, honestly, you look at how Kansas State is right now. Avery Johnson is all right. Like, he's not the craziest thing ever. He's all right. But imagine if you had Will Howard right now. Kansas State could be a top dog in the Big 12. Will Howard would just fit that team so much better right now. And I'm just not sure he's really fitting Ohio State that well. After all, he ended up costing the game against Oregon, you know. I'm just not really sure his play style and the way he operates is really what Ohio State wanted in replacement of Kyle McCord, although it is an improvement from Kyle McCord nonetheless, so you kind of have to take it. I just, for whatever reason, Will Howard doesn't feel like it fits Ohio State. So I'm going to take Penn State. I'm going to take Penn State to win by 4. Last time I said 33-30, which was a pretty damn good prediction. I'm going to sit in the same range because something you look at a lot of like the top 5 matchups we had this year, Ohio State, Oregon, Georgia, Alabama. They've all been pretty damn high-scoring games, with the only exception I guess, being the Georgia-Texas game, which was still a pretty high-scoring game. I mean, 30 points is not low scoring. It's just Texas was low scoring. That's just the only thing there. We're getting ready to see another top 5 matchup. I think just when you get to this level, like, it's not that defenses are just like showing their true colors. It's just that you're going up against much better offenses, and it's going to be hard to hold teams to little points in such a high passion matchup. And who knows? It could be lower scoring, but I think it's going to be higher scoring. After all, like every Ohio State-Michigan matchup was high scoring, even though, both teams had very solid defenses. That's what their team was about those years. All their games ended up being high scoring because it's just the passion and the power behind the matchup. I don't know. It's just that's college football. There ain't no defense in college football. So I've got Penn State winning it, although I could see Ohio State winning this game as well. The only factor here that really pushes Penn State ahead for me is the home field advantage. Because everything else, it looks like the teams are pretty even so far from what we've seen, but the home field advantage is in Penn State's favor this year. Duke at Miami. Sorry I yapped on that game for so long, but it's the only real good game. Duke at Miami. Duke had an opportunity to be ranked. They could have kicked the field goal, just won the game, but it got blocked. Went into overtime. Both teams score a touchdown, but you go for two and you don't get it. Duke blew it. Duke absolutely blew it. So they're not going into this game ranked, and you've lost all your momentum, quite frankly. Like, that's a demoralizing game. And you could say, yeah, let's bounce back against Miami, but it's not in your home stadium, which is why I think Duke even had an overtime game against SMU, was because it was in Duke's home stadium. Miami is such a better offensive team. Defense is iffy for Miami. Defense is definitely iffy. A lot of Miami games have been very high scoring, to say the least. With the only exception being that the Florida State game, but Florida State's offense is a pile of balls. But like Virginia Tech, Miami, 34-38. Cal, Miami, 39-38. Miami, Louisville, 52-45. Miami's defense does not look like it is the best thing ever. That's pretty obvious. But their offense, on the other side of things, is that offense. They're probably one of the best offenses in the league. So I wouldn't be surprised if Duke scores a couple points, but I think Miami will outscore this team. Cam Ward is just a dog, man. I really hope he wins the Heisman. He is an absolute dog. Ole Miss at Arkansas. My Arkansas hype is dying off, not because I don't think they're a good team anymore. That's not the reason. It's just because, for whatever reason, Arkansas, they struggle. They just struggle to perform when they need to. And the big thing for me is Arkansas, after all, they lost in double overtime to Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State has not won a conference game. They were 3-0 to start the year. Number 14, keep in mind. They got up to number 14 before they ripped off 5 straight losses. Not even, some of them were, respectable opponents, Kansas State, BYU, but other ones were fraudulent Utah, who fell off shortly after, West Virginia. Baylor's looking better, but the West Virginia loss in Oklahoma State Stadium is just that's the pooper. That's the stinker. And honestly, Utah since beating Oklahoma State on the road hasn't won a conference game past that. So you look at Oklahoma State, you look at Arkansas's loss against Oklahoma State. Yeah, it was in double overtime, and it was a road game, and it was at the start of the year, but that loss is starting to weigh on you. They did have a really solid road performance against Texas A&M, where they only lost by 4, and they beat Tennessee, but they got walloped by LSU. They did bounce back with a huge win against Mississippi State, they absolutely thrashed them. But you look at I'm looking at the Ole Miss Arkansas game, and Ole Miss needs this win more than Arkansas does. Now, there is a world, hear me out. There is a world in which Arkansas wins out the rest of the year and goes to the college football playoff. If they beat Ole Miss in this game, they get Texas after and a bye week before the Texas game. if you beat Ole Miss in your home stadium and then you beat Texas in your home stadium, and then, of course, you beat Louisiana Tech, your last game on the road against Missouri, must win. If you win all those, you're a 3-loss team with a win against Texas and Ole Miss and a win against Tennessee earlier in the year. Arkansas is a playoff football team, so that could play into this game. Arkansas could go into this game with a big mentality and a big statement to make. However, Ole Miss is in the same position. Ole Miss has to play at Arkansas. That's a must-win because afterwards you get your shining and your last opportunity against Georgia in your home stadium, a game that we've all been waiting for this year. Ole Miss has to win this one. They have to against Georgia if they want to get into the college football playoff. Because a 2-loss team with a win against Georgia, that is so doable. That is so college football playoff worthy. Your losses, or I guess your loss against Kentucky, really stinks up a fucking fart bomb. But LSU loss, okay, it's respectable. And then if you have the win over Georgia, that's above all. So I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of motive going into this game. This is an important game for both of these teams. It's going to be down to who makes more mistakes, and I don't think these teams are really going to make either mistakes. I'm going to take Ole Miss to go on the road and win it because overall, in a non-mistake game, I think Ole Miss has more talent and better players, as well as a strong-ass defense. But Ole Miss also has kind of struggled offensively. Even though Jackson Dart had one of the most passing yards, I think he did it last year also, though, where he was one of the highest passing yard quarterbacks. I mean, you look at the first 4 games of Ole Miss, and those are big, fat stat patterns. And then once you get to the Kentucky game, it sloped. It dropped off. They haven't put up 30. They haven't put up more than 30 points. They haven't put up more than 27 points, which isn't terrible offense, but 27 was the peak. It was 26 after that, which took overtime and all game. So you can expect Ole Miss to struggle against Arkansas. You can also expect Arkansas to really struggle against Ole Miss. But this one is interesting, and this one is also up in the air. Arkansas can whip out games where they perform really well. They should have stomped Tennessee. They had so many shining opportunities to score way more points. They should have stomped Tennessee into the floor, but instead it was close, and they still managed to win. Arkansas can play really good football. They just, can't do what they did against LSU. Air Force at Army. Crazy that Army and Navy are now ranked in one loss. Air Force was that team last year before they absolutely fell off. Now Air Force has they've pulled a complete 360 and they're 1-7. So give me Army by big. Minnesota at Illinois. Want to know something crazy about this game? You could take many guesses. You won't get it right. Minnesota is favored by 3 to go on the road to Illinois and win this game. Now, I don't know if there was any major injuries, like a quarterback injury. It does look like, I guess, Illinois' starting running back is out. But, after all, I mean, I don't like to look at football like this because it's not really true. But Minnesota lost to Michigan. Illinois beat the crap out of Michigan. So what does that mean for this game type shit? Illinois also has a big road win against Nebraska in overtime. Illinois' only 2 losses are against number 1 and number 3. Number 1 Oregon on the road and number 3 Penn State on the road. They didn't even get the opportunity of having them in their home stadium. They were on the road for those games. Tough luck Illinois. Minnesota's losses, on the other hand, it's North Carolina, Iowa, and Michigan. And Iowa stomped in Minnesota in their home stadium. Their big win in quotations, which I do think is a pretty good win, but their big win in quotations in terms of rankings was against USC. And it was a very close game that they scored a touchdown in the last the last minute. And since then, they had a 4-point win against UCLA and then a domination in their home stadium against Maryland, which it's okay, so their wins are against, nobody really special. I guess the peak of it being USC. But other than that, like they haven't really played anybody. Illinois has played much tougher competition and prevailed to a 2-loss record, and we're favoring Minnesota. I think we can expect we can expect it to be close and defensive because that's what these teams have been all year, but I don't think Minnesota's winning this one. Hey, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I don't think Minnesota's winning this one unless there's like a quarterback injury or something huge that I'm not sure about, that I'm not taking note of. That could be the game changer. But until then, I've got Illinois winning this one by more than 3, to say the least. Oregon at Michigan. At the start of the year in my Big Ten prediction videos, I had Oregon beating Ohio State, but then losing to Purdue and then losing to Michigan. I believe that was what I had. It was like either that or that was a draft video before I made changes. I don't really remember, but I know I had Oregon losing to Purdue, which I had a lot of faith in Purdue to make upsets happen this year, but they're just terrible. Oregon at Michigan, there's no chance. Oregon is really starting to get comfortable in their nice, shiny throne right now at the number 1 spot. Oregon is that team right now. This is their year to do it. Biggest team in their way is Oregon, because right after that, you've got Penn State and Ohio State right now at the next 2 spots, and you already took one of those teams down. So I think Oregon is definitely looking to the future right now. This is not an area in which you drop one. I do think Michigan's home stadium will play into major effect, but ultimately what we've seen from Michigan, we thought at least their defense would keep them intact, and that hasn't really been the case. I mean, they've been scraping by. So I don't think Michigan's got this one. I think Oregon's going to handle it. Florida at Georgia. Nothing to be said here. I don't have any faith in Florida to win this one. Florida has been playing a bit better since their hideous start to the year against Miami, but I don't know. Georgia took a bad loss to Alabama, got down big. Carson Beck mistakes ended up losing them that game. If Carson Beck, I will say it again and again and again, and so will the rest of the college football world, if Carson Beck can get his shit figured out right now, Georgia's the number 1 team in the country. But until then, they're the number 2 team in the country. But I don't think he'll make mistakes against Florida. Texas Tech at Iowa State. This was a game I was really excited for until Texas Tech ripped off 2 bad losses. A home loss and a home annihilation by Baylor. Baylor hit the road and killed Texas Tech, and then Texas Tech dropped one to TCU, in which I think Texas Tech's quarterback, their starting QB, might have gotten hurt, although don't quote me on that. So now Texas Tech is a 3-loss team, a team that could have been ranked and a team that was really good to start the year, aside from their bad loss against Washington State, in which they just turned the ball over infinity and beyond. Texas Tech had every opportunity to turn their game around, to turn their season around, and they looked like they were going to do it. They had a big win against ASU to start off conference play. I forget who they beat after that, but a huge offensive matchup in which they prevailed against Cincinnati. And then what looked like at the time a big road win against Arizona, because Arizona at that point was still close to the rankings and well-respected. But Texas Tech ended up winning that one pretty big. But then you lose that terrible game to Baylor, in which Baylor was 2-4 at the time. Baylor was 2-4 at the time with a loss to Utah, with a loss to Iowa State and BYU and Colorado. So it's they played the way tougher side of competition. And after all, they lost in overtime to Colorado. But that Utah loss doesn't look too good. And quite frankly, the BYU and the Iowa State game, they weren't close. The BYU game finished off close, but it was a comeback. It was a fairy tale comeback. And since then, Baylor has taken it out on their opponents. So I do think Baylor is one of the better teams in the conference, but still, that loss for Texas Tech is really bad. And now they have to hit the road and play Iowa State. I think you could expect a high-scoring game, because Iowa State has put up a lot of points this year outside of the West Virginia, Houston, and Iowa games. Like, they've put up a lot of points. And I don't care what happened in that UCF game. That was Iowa State attempting to beat themselves down relentlessly, and they still prevailed. Iowa State is one of the best teams in the Big 12, obviously, but probably the best. I don't want to say they're better than BYU because right now Iowa State and BYU look very even, but they're fighting for the best spot. Kansas State's not in that conversation right now. Indiana at Michigan State. I'm calling, not for the upset, but I'm calling for the first close game for Indiana this year. It's unbelievable that Indiana has gone this far without a singular close game. Their closest game was against Northwestern, in which they still won by 17 points. I'm going to call for their first close one. Michigan State has had a tough break in this season, A 4-point loss against Boston College on the road, 2 beatdowns against top dogs Ohio State and Oregon, and then you lose a really close game against Michigan, in which they probably could have won that game, but that's what rivalries will do to you. Like, the mistakes they made. 4th and 5 at the Michigan 16. You gotta complete the pass there. You gotta convert. You made a comeback. You got to get it done, and you just didn't do it. They've been on the shit side of this season. I think they're going to go into this game with a lot of firepower and a lot of, upset on their mind. Michigan State, their season is pretty much over in terms of, like, college football playoff and stuff, and they only get one real opportunity after this, and it's at Illinois. But in terms of your home stadium, you get to play the sensation Indiana. Michigan State is looking for upsets and season enders, although this wouldn't end Indiana's season, but it would make it very difficult for them to get into the college football playoff. I think Michigan State is going to give Indiana a really, really rough time, but Indiana, I still got them prevailing. Kansas State at Houston. The amount of people right now, oh my gosh, let me just say this. The amount of people right now that are saying Kansas State is going to be the Big 12 champion and the 4 seed and stuff, acting like BYU didn't absolutely thrash this team. I do not give a shit what happened in that game. Kansas State played like horse ass in that game. They were terrible. And since then, they've bounced back with only one good win on their schedule, and that was against Colorado. And Colorado probably could have won that game and should have won that game, but they blew it. They absolutely blew it. Now you get a 2-point win against Kansas most recently, who is 2-6. I do believe Kansas is much better than their record, but still, they're 2-6. And you go up against Houston. Houston has played a lot of defensive matchups, and they've had a lot of close calls, to say the least. I mean, 20-0 against Iowa State. Yeah, you got shut out, but still, you managed to hold Iowa State to just 20 points. If anything, Houston has a bit of a defense, as well as, they turned the ball over 3 times to Iowa State, and Iowa State couldn't score more than 20 points. Houston almost went on the road and beat Oklahoma, which, whatever, not that impressive. And they have a 30-19 victory on the road against TCU. And most recently, they won a defensive matchup against Utah, which, okay, Utah doesn't look too good right now. But you get ready to go up against Kansas State, another situation, and this is your last opportunity at home against a ranked opponent. Other than that, you finish off the year with a road game against BYU. So you look and see what opportunity is much better. I think the Kansas State game is a much better opportunity to attempt a stunning upset. I don't think it's going to happen, but I do think it's going to be close. Kansas State, dude, I just don't know why people are saying Kansas State is going to be the Big 12 champion. They're going to play Iowa State. They're going to play Iowa State to finish off the year, and they're going to lose. They're going to lose that game. And they even have a really difficult finish to the year. I think this game's going to be close. You get to host ASU, okay. You get to host Cincinnati. Yep, totally. Cincinnati, okay. But that final game against Iowa State, man, like ASU and Cincinnati, they're not easy teams. They're going to play tough. And then you have to go on the road to Iowa State. Yeah, right. Kansas State's not winning the Big 12. Texas A&M at South Carolina. Upset alert. Put it on upset alert. I'm not going to take the upset, although a part of me sort of wants to, but I'm not gonna. Because after all, this quarterback, I forget his name, maybe like Marcel. Yeah, Marcel Reed came into the LSU game and ripped off points on every single drive he stepped foot into, and he looked like an absolute boss going into that game. But a lot of that could have been momentum and passion. How is he going to perform in a hostile environment? Maybe when his team isn't playing as good, like a lot of okay, yeah, you play really, really well against LSU, and it was a great performance, yes. But what happens if your team is making mistakes and stuff? Can you be the guy to pull them out of a hole and make the big plays? I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure if he's the guy. I'm going to take Texas A&M to win, but this is a game in which, we could see South Carolina pull their bounce back because, after all, win this, you get a road game against Vanderbilt, a home game against Missouri, home game against Wofford, and then a road game against Clemson. There's a lot of opportunity for South Carolina to make a name for themselves, but I think Texas A&M, they can finish out the year and be the SEC champion, okay? That's a big statement to make. But you get this road game against South Carolina. You can't drop one against Auburn, but then you get the luxury of hosting Texas. Ridiculous game there. That is going to be an insane rivalry. Like, absolutely ridiculous rivalry right there. That is going to be one of the games of the year. I'm calling it now. And you win those, you're undefeated in the conference. You didn't lose a game, okay? They're already undefeated in the conference, and they stand at the top. So it's going to be, who do you play in the SEC championship? You've got Georgia ahead of you, which still has to play a very tough schedule. They get to go on the road to Ole Miss and host Tennessee. You get Tennessee, again, on the road at Georgia and on the road at Vanderbilt. Texas lost to Georgia, so they'd lose the tiebreaker there, and you get to play Texas. LSU, still a one-loss team in the conference, but they play Alabama, and they still have to play Vanderbilt. And then past that point, you're under the two teams. A&M, they control their destiny. They could see themselves as literally, I don't want to say the number one overall seed, because the Big Ten is, I think, the better conference this year. But the 2 seed, this team could be the 2 seed. At the very least, they could be the 3 seed. And they could have a lot of momentum going into the college football playoff. Who would have thunk it? A&M. But they have the schedule to do it. They have the team to do it. It's going to come down to Marcel Reed, and it starts with this game, though. The win over LSU was a baby step. That was your prove-it game. That was your prove what you're made of. Show me what you got. And they showed me what they got, but it was iffy because you pulled a different quarterback and insane momentum. There's a lot of things that are questionable still. Now let's see how you perform on the road. After this, I say it's smooth sailing until that Texas game. But I think they will win this game. I like Texas A&M this year. Louisville at Clemson. Louisville could cause some issues here. I just want to say Clemson is number 12 right now. And since they're complete butt whooping against Georgia, they have played absolutely nobody, with the toughest of the competition being Virginia, not NC State. NC State ripped off all those points in shit time. Virginia actually played a relatively tough game, but the teams that they played was Appalachian State, NC State, Stanford, Florida State, Wake Forest, Virginia. They haven't played fuck shit. And they have a rude awakening at the second half of the year for Clemson that's going to finally shut people up about them. They have to host Louisville, on the road against Virginia Tech, on the road against Pitt, the Citadel, okay, whatever, and then a rivalry match against South Carolina, which no one is safe in. I think Clemson will beat Louisville because rivalry, and it's in Clemson's home stadium. This was at Louisville. I might take Louisville, but it's at Clemson, so it's making it difficult. But I do think Louisville has been on one of those teams that's been on the shit side of the ball and is looking for their lucky break. They lost 3 games. I don't believe in a row. I think they had a gap, but they lost 3 games of 4 games by 7 points. They lost to Notre Dame on the road by 7. They lost at home to SMU by 7 points. They lost at home against Miami by 7 points. they have had a tough break. And outside of those games, outside of the toughest competition, yeah, they barely scraped by Virginia and Boston College, but they still won the games. That's the important part. So I think Clemson or Louisville is looking for their big break, their big win, because they've had the shit side of the ball. This is one of your opportunities. Later in the year, you still get Pitt. I mean, they have the opportunity and the schedule. I guess this being a very, very long stretch, but they have the opportunity to be a 3-loss team, which isn't bad. And, make a name for themselves, at least going into next year. But Clemson, they're in for a rude awakening, man. They're not making it to the ACC championship. Or actually, I guess they're undefeated in the conference. Their losses against Georgia. But I don't think they're winning the SEC or ACC championship. Miami, SMU, Pitt, Virginia Tech, they're all better teams than Clemson. Saying it now. They're all better teams. Louisville at Clemson. This is Kentucky at Tennessee. Oh, I almost went without making a mistake. Damn it. What is wrong with me? Okay, but goddamn. Kentucky at Tennessee. Kentucky has performed really, really well against the tough opponents. Even Vanderbilt was a close game, but this team has absolutely fallen apart since Ole Miss victory. That was their opportunity to bounce back and make a name for themselves, but they lost like 3 straight, and one of them was they got killed by Florida. So give me Tennessee in a close defensive game, but give me Tennessee. Pitt at SMU, our final game of the week and one of our best games of the week. SMU has been the final game of like every single video. They always get the really late night games or the later games. But the thing here for me is SMU has a really, really solid loss against BYU, a 3-point loss there in a super defensive matchup as well. BYU has been kind of stomping on opponents. They've been stomping on opponents in their games. And honestly, BYU had 70 more yards of offense than SMU. Both teams had pretty equal turnovers, but BYU prevailed on the road there. SMU played really good football there, or at least for the most part. They played really, really well against BYU. Little did we know what BYU was made of at that time, but that is starting to look much better. And it looks really good for BYU on the other side of things. But SMU has a big road win against Louisville. And since then, they barely got away from Duke. But since then, they win games. SMU is a pretty good team this year. 7-1. You win this game, you're looking at a spot in the ACC championship from what it looks like because they don't have anybody else past this. So they got to win this. This is a must win. On the other side of things, you've got a Pitt team who is passionate and resilient. This team refuses to lose games. 1-point win against Cincinnati on the road, which was a comeback game, a comeback win. They were down 6-27 with 4 minutes and 50. Actually, like with a minute left in the third quarter, they were down 6-27, and they rallied all the way back and managed to win that game, which isn't even it's not even a bad game. Cincinnati's a pretty good team this year, so that's actually an impressive road win there. And then you rally back to beat West Virginia again in that game. They were down like 10 points or something. They were down 34-24, and they 3 minutes left in the game, score 14 to win that one. Okay, West Virginia is like not the best thing ever, but what's important is a comeback game. And then you manage to stop Cal from upsetting you in your home stadium. You've got a lot of resiliency and a lot of grit to keep on going undefeated like this and to pull games out. And they're kind of like the Arizona Cardinals. Like they just, at the end of the day, a win is a win, and you showing that resiliency is impressive and solid. I think Pitt will make this one difficult, but SMU is the hardest competition they're going to play. Give me SMU, but in a close one. And this will be Pitt's first loss of this season, but it's not over because they get to host Virginia after, and then they get to host Clemson. At Louisville's a tough one, and at Boston College is also a tough one. But hosting Clemson is the big one there. I think Pitt's going to show up for that game. But that is all for this video. I hope you guys enjoy. A like and subscribe would help. A comment always helps, and that's all for me. Adios.